My name is Declan O'Rourke, and I am 67 years old. I worked as a mechanic at an agricultural machinery factory in Denver for 38 years, and I have been retired for 5 years now. I live with my wife, Myrna, who is 64 and used to be a nurse at the city hospital. We have two children, our son Kyle, 42, who works as a mechanic and is into motorcycles, and our daughter Hazel, 38, who is a cashier at a large supermarket. Hazel is married to Trent, and they have a 10-year-old daughter, Scarlett. We live in a small house in the Highlands, not far from the city center. That Saturday in early September began as usual. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, as always. 40 years of factory work had left its mark, even after 5 years of retirement. Myrna was still asleep, so I quietly went to the kitchen and made coffee. I love those quiet morning moments when I can read yesterday's newspaper and think about the day ahead. The newspaper reported on rising gasoline prices and the city authorities' plans to repair the roads in our neighborhood. The usual news, nothing special. After breakfast, I went to pick up my granddaughter to take her for a walk in the park. It's only a 12-minute walk to Hazel's through the residential neighborhood. I like our neighborhood. The houses are small but well kept, and each has its own garden. The neighbors know each other by sight and greet each other when they meet. It's not like in the new neighborhoods where people live next door to each other for years and never talk. Mrs. Harrison was watering the flowers by her porch and waved to me. Old Mr. Collins was walking his fat Labrador, who, as always, was pulling on the leash with all his might. Scarlett was waiting for me at the door, already dressed in jeans and a pink jacket with a unicorn on it. That jacket was a gift from Myrna and me for her birthday 2 months ago. My granddaughter loved it and wears it almost every day, even when it's too warm outside. "Grandpa, are we going to play soccer today?" she asked, grabbing my hand. "Of course, Princess. Did you bring the ball?" She nodded and showed me a small soccer ball that she was holding tightly under her arm. "I bought her that ball 2 months ago when we first went to play in the park." Scarlett saw other children kicking a ball around on the lawn and wanted to try it too. At first, she only kicked it with the toe of her shoe, but gradually she learned to kick the ball with the inside of her foot, as I had taught her. We headed towards Highland Park, which was only 3 blocks away from their house. On the way, Scarlett told me about school, how Jason Miller got a B in math class yesterday for not learning his multiplication tables, and how their teacher, Miss Anderson, promised to hold a contest for the best Halloween drawing. The morning was cool, typical of a Colorado autumn, and there was already a hint of approaching winter in the air. The leaves on the trees were beginning to change color, yellow, orange, and red spots among the greenery. In a month, all this splendor would fall away, and the long winter would begin. But for now, it was still possible to enjoy the warm days and walks without heavy jackets. The park was not too crowded at this time. Several young mothers pushed strollers along the paved paths, and an elderly couple fed ducks at a small pond. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the voices of children on the playground and the creaking of swings. I like this park. It's not as big as City Park in the center, but it's quiet and cozy. It has everything you need: walking paths, a pond with ducks, several sports fields, and a large lawn for games. The city authorities keep it in good condition. The grass is mowed regularly, the paths are cleaned, and the benches are painted. We found a free lawn away from the paths and started playing. Scarlett was quite agile for her age, although she sometimes missed the ball, which made her giggle. She tried to repeat my movements, passing the ball with the inside of her foot, stopping it in front of her before passing it. Sometimes she did very well. "Grandpa, did you really play soccer in school?" she asked as we tossed the ball back and forth. "I did, but not very well. I liked working with my hands more than running around the field, and the coach preferred taller, faster guys. Dad says sports are stupid, that it's better to do something useful." I grimaced. Trent really did have a habit of making categorical judgments about everything. However, lately he had become somewhat nervous and distracted. Hazel complained that he didn't sleep well, was constantly thinking about something and making plans. "What does your mom say about sports?" "Mom says it's good for your health and that I need to move more, not just sit on my tablet." Mom's right. Movement is life. We spent about an hour and a half in the park. Scarlett was tired, her cheeks red from running, and we slowly made our way back. She told me about her math teacher, who, according to her, was too strict and gave too much homework, and about her new friend Emma, who had recently moved from California and knew how to do very pretty braids. She also complained that the boys in her class were acting silly and constantly pulling the girl's hair. Fight back, I advised. Grandpa, Scarlett protested. Mom said you're not allowed to fight. Well, then tell your teacher. Let her talk to them. I already did. She said the boys pull the girl's hair because they like them. That's nonsense, I muttered. In my day, they got a slap on the back of the head for that. When we approached Hazel's house, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Through the open window, I could hear my daughter and son-in-law talking. The tone was tense, and I involuntarily slowed my pace. I don't like to interfere in family matters, but when it comes to my daughter and granddaughter, I always listen carefully. Grandpa, let's hurry, Scarlett said, but I stopped at the porch. Wait a minute, Princess. Let Grandpa catch his breath. Trent's voice sounded agitated and a little irritated. Hazel, this is our chance. Opportunities like this don't just come along. I've been studying the market for 6 months, talking to people. But $25,000. My daughter's voice was quiet and concerned. That's a lot of money, Trent. We don't earn that much in a year. I've done the math. A used appliance store in that neighborhood is sure to be a hit. See for yourself. People are always looking for cheap TVS, refrigerators, washing machines. And I know suppliers who give good prices. Plus, the repairs aren't complicated, mostly cleaning and replacing small parts. What if it doesn't work out? What then? It will work out. I'm not stupid. I've calculated everything and studied the competition. There's only one second-hand appliance store in that area, and it's not doing well. The owner is old, there's no advertising, and the products aren't cleaned. I frowned. Trent had tried various get-rich-quick schemes more than once. 2 years ago, he sold some kind of dietary supplements online, buying them in bulk and reselling them on his website. Then he tried selling used cars, also online. None of this made him a lot of money, but he didn't lose much either. But a loan of $25,000 is serious. Scarlett tugged at my sleeve. Grandpa, I want to show Mom how I scored a goal today. Right away, Princess. We climbed the porch steps and entered the house. Hazel and Trent were sitting at the kitchen table, some papers and an open laptop in front of them. My daughter looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, while my son-in-law, on the contrary, was excited and nervously twirling a pen. There were 2 half-finished cups of coffee on the table. Hi, Dad, Hazel said, getting up to hug Scarlett. How was your walk? Mom, I scored 2 goals against Grandpa, her granddaughter announced happily, and I learned how to stop the ball with my foot, like the professional soccer players. Well done. Go wash your hands and get changed, then tell us more. Scarlett ran off to her room, and I stayed in the kitchen. Trent stood up and held out his hand to me. Declan, how are you? You look great. Sports are great. Thanks. How are you? I see you're discussing something important. Hazel glanced at her husband and he nodded. It was clear that they were discussing whether to let me in on their plans. Actually, Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something. Trent has a great opportunity to start his own business. Trent immediately perked up and pulled his laptop closer to him. Imagine, Declan, a store for used appliances. I found a great space on Colfax Avenue, and the rent is quite reasonable. $800 a month. And the demand for cheap appliances is huge right now. The economy isn't so stable. People are saving money, but they can't live without a refrigerator or a TV. And how much will it cost? I asked, even though I had already heard the figure through the window. $25,000 for the down payment, fitting out the premises, and purchasing the first batch of goods. The bank has already approved the loan. All the documents are ready. All that's left is to sign. Trent turned his laptop toward me. The screen displayed a table with figures, estimated expenses and income, a business development plan. Everything looked very neat and professional, but I knew that pretty tables did not guarantee success. I sat down on a chair and looked closely at the documents. Bank papers always look solid and impressive, but they often hide unpleasant surprises. A loan agreement, income statements, a 20-page business plan. Do you have any experience in trade? Well, I sold electronics at Best Buy for 3 years, Trent said, a little embarrassed. Plus, I worked at an online auto parts store for a year. And besides, it's not rocket science. Buy low, sell high. Working in a store and running your own business are two different things. There, the goods were delivered to you, and customers were brought in by advertising. Here, you have to do everything yourself. I understand, but I have a plan. Advertising in local newspapers, flyers in mailboxes, plus word of mouth. If you repair equipment well, customers will recommend you themselves. Where will you get the goods? I have contacts. A friend of mine works for a company called Techno Demontage. They buy appliances from insurance companies after accidents and fires. Most of the goods are in good condition. They just need to be cleaned or slightly repaired. The prices are 3 to 4 times lower than in stores. Hazel listened carefully to the conversation. She was clearly nervous, but she supported her husband. Dad, we understand that this is a risk, but Trent has been working for peanuts for a long time, and now there's a chance to change something. Maybe in a couple of years we'll have our own house instead of this rented apartment. I was silent, thinking about what I had heard. Of course, everyone has the right to try to improve their life. When I was young, I dreamed of starting my own business. But at that time, I had no money, no connections, and no experience. But what Trent was saying sounded too optimistic. A used appliance store on Colfax Avenue is not the most prestigious area. There are many poor people there. And as for supply contacts, in my life, I've seen many people who promised mountains of gold thanks to their connections and acquaintances. When do you plan to open? As soon as the bank transfers the money. I think we'll be able to welcome our first customers in 2 or 3 weeks. The premises are almost ready. We just need to clean up a bit and put up some shelves. What about the competition? Have you looked into that? Of course. There are only 2 second-hand appliance stores within a 5-kilometer radius. One of them is poorly run. It's dirty, the owner is old, and there's no advertising. The other one is more expensive. They sell refurbished appliances at almost the same price as new ones. What if it doesn't work out? I asked bluntly. What if sales don't go as planned? 25,000 is no joke. Trent hesitated for a second, then replied with feigned confidence. If it doesn't work out, well, then we'll look for other options. We can sell the goods wholesale and get at least some of the money back. But I'm sure it will work out. I've got it all figured out. At that moment, Scarlett, dressed in her home clothes, ran into the kitchen. Grandpa, are you staying for lunch? Mom said she's making macaroni and cheese. No, Princess. It's time for me to go home. Grandma's waiting for me. We were going to go to the store. It was a little white lie. Myrna and I weren't going anywhere, but I wanted to leave and think things over. The atmosphere in the house was tense, and I felt that my presence only added to the discomfort. I got up and kissed my granddaughter and daughter. Trent walked me to the door. Declan, I understand your doubts. It's normal to be cautious at your age, but sometimes you have to take risks to achieve something. Otherwise, you'll be working for your uncle your whole life. Sometimes you have to, I agreed. The main thing is that the risk doesn't become too costly for the family, and that if you fail, you still have something to eat and somewhere to live. Everything will be fine, Trent said, but I heard uncertainty in his voice. I went outside and headed home. The sun had risen higher, and it was noticeably warmer. I took off my light jacket and hung it on my arm. As I passed the gas station on the corner of 38th and Highlands, I heard the familiar roar of motorcycles. 7 bikes were riding toward me, led by my son Kyle on his black Harley-Davidson. When he saw me, he signaled to the others, and the whole group pulled over to the side of the road. Kyle took off his helmet, his long dark hair tied back in a ponytail, and his leather jacket adorned with Mountain Wolves Motorcycle Club patches. A duffel bag was strapped to the back seat of his bike. They were apparently going on a long trip. Hey, old man, he said, getting off his motorcycle. Where are you headed? I'm coming from Hazel's. I was walking with my granddaughter in the park. How's your sister doing? Same old, Trent's starting a new business again. Kyle grimaced. He had never hidden his feelings about his brother-in-law. He considered him a frivolous chatterbox who planned more than he did. Again, what is it this time? He wants to open a used equipment store. He took out a loan. How much? 25,000. Kyle whistled. Wow. Does he even know anything about business, or is he just hoping for the best again? The other bikers waited patiently, some smoking and chatting among themselves. I knew most of them. They were good guys who just loved freedom and speed. Among them was Bradley, a tall guy in his 30s who worked as a welder on a construction site. Next to him stood Marcus, a black veteran who had lost a leg in Afghanistan but still never parted with his motorcycle. There were others there too, mechanics, truck drivers, ordinary working people for whom a motorcycle was not just a means of transportation, but a way to feel free. Ah, I said, looking at the motorcycles, it reminds me of my youth. Remember when I told you about my Triumph? Of course I remember. You've told me 100 times, Kyle laughed, but the guys haven't heard it. Well, I'll tell you the 101st time, I winked at Bradley. The year was 1974. I was 22 and had just married Myrna. I bought a used 1971 Triumph Bonneville, red as a fire truck. I paid $1,500 for it, which was a lot of money back then. I thought I'd look like Marlon Brando in The Wild One. And how did that work out? Bradley asked with a smile. I fell off it 3 times in the first month. Once I even skidded into a roadside ditch. I was trying to pass a truck, and the road was wet. Myrna said then, either the motorcycle or me. I had to choose. And you made the right choice, said Kyle. Although sometimes I regret not knowing you back then. It would have been fun to ride together. Come on, but now you ride better than I ever could. And your motorcycle is better than my old Triumph. What happened to it? Marcus asked. I sold it 6 months after the wedding. Myrna was pregnant with Kyle, and we needed money for a crib and a stroller. Sometimes I still regret it. We talked for a few more minutes about motorcycles and the bikers' plans for the weekend. They were going to the mountains, to a lake, where several clubs were supposed to meet. Then Kyle looked at his watch. We have to go, old man. We want to get there before dark, drive carefully, and say hi to the others. Kyle waved to me, put on his helmet, and started the motorcycle. The whole group took off and disappeared into the stream of other cars heading for the mountains. I watched them go and thought about how my son had found his place in life. He has a job he likes, friends, and a hobby. But things with Hazel are getting more complicated. Myrna met me at home. She was cooking dinner, and the whole house was filled with the smell of roasted chicken with herbs and mashed potatoes. Soft music was playing in the living room, some old Frank Sinatra song. How's my granddaughter? She asked without turning away from the stove. Great. She's learning to play soccer and telling me all about school. But things are strange with Hazel and Trent. Myrna turned to me with a concerned look on her face. What's wrong? I told her about my son-in-law's plans and the loan, how they had discussed the business plan, and my doubts. Myrna listened attentively, nodding from time to time and asking clarifying questions. 25,000, she finally said, sitting down across from me at the table. That's more than half of what they earn in a year together. Exactly. And if the business fails, they'll be paying it off for 10 years, maybe even more, with interest. What do you think? Maybe he'll succeed. Maybe we're worrying for nothing. I shrugged. I don't know, Myrna. Maybe he will, but I'm wary of the way he talks about it. Too confident, too easy, as if trading is something simple. And I know people who have been trading their whole lives and still barely make ends meet. But people trade and make money somehow. Take Jimmy McDonald, for example. He opened a car repair shop 15 years ago, and now he has 3 branches. People trade, but most of them study the business first, work in the field for years, understand what's what. And Trent, he just decided he could do it, based on the fact that he sold TVS in a shopping mall for 3 years. Myrna put the plates on the table and laid out the napkins. Did Hazel seem upset? Yes, she's clearly worried. You can see she has doubts, but she supports her husband. She doesn't want to upset him. Of course she supports him. She's his wife. And besides, maybe she's tired of always being short of money. We ate in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. A flock of birds flew past the window, heading south. Winter is coming, I thought. And for winter, it would be good to have a stable job and a roof over my head, rather than loans and dubious ventures. The following Tuesday, I met Otis Graves as usual at Sally's Cafe on Tennyson Street. We've been friends for almost 40 years, having met at the factory when he worked in the delivery department. Otis is 2 years older than me, but he looks younger. Tall, fit, with a gray mustache that he carefully trims every week. After retiring, he took up gardening and now grows the best tomatoes in the neighborhood. Sally's is a small family-owned cafe that has been around for 20 years. Nothing fancy, plastic tables, old chairs, the smell of fried bacon and coffee. But it's always quiet here. You can talk in peace, and Sally makes excellent roast beef sandwiches. On Tuesdays, we have a tradition of meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, ordering coffee and playing dominoes. Otis was already sitting at our usual table by the window, laying out the dominoes. In front of him was a cup of black coffee and a half-eaten piece of apple pie. "Hi, Declan. How are you?" he greeted me without looking up from the tiles. "Fine. How about you? Does your wife complain about these daily trips to the cafe?" Dorothy understands that an old man needs to get out of the house sometimes, and she feels better knowing where to find me. I ordered coffee and sat down across from him. Otis had already mixed the tiles and began dealing them out, 7 to each of us. We play by simple rules, without any special tricks. Whoever lays down all their dice first wins. "How's your granddaughter?" Otis asked, laying down the first dice with 2 sixes. "She's growing up. We went for a walk in the park on Saturday and played soccer, but I'm having problems with my son-in-law." "What has Trent come up with now?" "He took out a loan. $25,000. He wants to open a used appliance store." Otis paused, the dice with a 3 and a 6 frozen in his hand. "Are you serious? 25,000? Serious. He's already made an agreement with the bank and will be signing the papers in a few days." "Does he have any experience?" "What experience?" "He sold TVS at Best Buy for 3 years. He thinks that's enough." Otis put down the dice and shook his head. "I remember when my brother Ray decided to go into business too. He opened a sporting goods store in '78. He thought that since he was into fishing, he could sell fishing gear. A year and a half later, he was bankrupt. He spent another 10 years paying off the loan." "Exactly. But Trent is sure he'll succeed. He says he studied the market and looked at the competition." "What does Hazel think?" "She supports her husband. Although you can see she's worried." We played in silence for 15 minutes. Otis was winning. He had only 2 dice left, and I had 5. But I was more preoccupied with thoughts of my son-in-law than with the game. "You know what?" I said suddenly. "Let's go see this place he's renting. Trent said it's on Colfax Avenue." "I'm curious to see what it's like." "Why?" Otis asked, surprised. "Just out of curiosity. I want to understand what he's getting himself into. Maybe I'm worrying for nothing, and it's actually a good place. Colfax Avenue is long. There are decent areas and not-so-decent areas. That's why I want to see it." Otis won the game and started collecting the dice. "Okay, let's go. We've got nothing else to do. We just need to find out the address." I called Hazel from the cafe phone. I explained that I wanted to see the place to better understand Trent's plans. My daughter gave me the address, 4823 Colfax Avenue. "That's almost out of town," Otis said, writing down the address. "That's where the industrial zone begins." We got into my old Ford Taurus and drove west on Colfax. The road was familiar. I had driven this way to the factory for many years, only turning earlier. At first, we drove through the central part, past shops, restaurants, and office buildings. But the further west we went, the poorer the neighborhoods became. Abandoned houses, junkyards, and warehouses appeared. "I don't like this road," Otis said, looking at the buildings passing by. "Too many empty storefronts." "I don't like it either. Look, half the stores are closed." We drove past several shopping centers that were clearly not experiencing their best times. The large parking lots were half empty, and many storefronts were covered with newspapers or plywood. One building had a "For Rent" banner with a phone number. "Here's our address," Otis said, pointing to a long, single-story building on the right. I pulled over to the curb and turned off the engine. We got out of the car and walked closer. The building really did look like an old warehouse. Brick walls, flat roof, large windows, some of which were boarded up. Next to it was a car repair shop, which also looked abandoned, and a used auto parts store. "Fun place," Otis muttered. The space Trent was planning to rent was at the end of the building. An old sign reading "Electronics and Appliances" hung above the entrance, but the letters were peeling and half the words were illegible. The display window was covered with old newspapers on the inside. "Looks like someone used to sell appliances here," I remarked, "and then closed down." The question was, why? We walked around the perimeter of the building. At the back was a small courtyard littered with trash and rusty metal. The fence was crooked, and some sections had fallen down. In the corner of the courtyard stood an old car without wheels, overgrown with grass. Declan, are you sure Trent saw this place? Otis asked. He said he did, but maybe he only saw it from the inside. We returned to the entrance. The door was locked, but there was a hole in the glass, covered with tape. We could see inside through it. The room was quite large, probably about 150 square meters, but it looked neglected. The walls needed painting, the floor was dirty, and old fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, half of which didn't work. It'll need serious renovation, Otis said, and that means extra costs. I wonder if Trent factored that into his calculations. We stood there for a few more minutes looking around. There wasn't much traffic on the road, mostly trucks and old cars. There were almost no pedestrians. The nearest bus stop was about 200 meters away, and it didn't look very appealing. Broken glass, graffiti-covered walls. You know what worries me the most? I said, returning to the car. What? If they used to sell appliances here and closed down, it means there's no demand. Or the competition is too strong. Or the owner just didn't know how to sell. Maybe, but still it's not a great location. We got in the car and drove back. On the way, Otis told me how his nephew had tried to open a car wash in a similar neighborhood and also went bankrupt. According to him, the main problem was that people in such neighborhoods prefer to save money on everything, even car washes. And appliances are a special kind of product, he added. People don't buy them every day. And when they do buy them, they want to be sure they won't break down in a month. Exactly. And who would trust the quality of appliances bought in a place like that? When we got back to the city, I decided to stop by Hazel's. I wanted to talk to her about what we had seen. Maybe she didn't know what the place looked like, and it was worth telling her. Trent wasn't home. Hazel said he had gone to the bank to sign the final documents. Scarlett was doing her homework at the kitchen table, diligently writing out letters in cursive. Her daughter looked tired but tried to smile. "Dad, how are you?" "You're home early today. Just running some errands with Otis." "Hazel, can I talk to you?" "Sure, Scarlett. Go to your room and finish your homework." "But Mom, I'm almost done." "Go on, sweetie. You can finish later." Her granddaughter gathered her notebooks with a frown and went to her room. Hazel sat down across from me and poured tea from the teapot. "What did you want to talk about?" "Otis and I went to look at the place Trent is thinking of renting." "What did you think?" Her daughter's voice sounded wary. "Hazel, it's a very bad location. The neighborhood is run down, the building is old, and it's surrounded by warehouses and junkyards. Who's going to go there to buy equipment?" Her daughter frowned. "Dad, why did you go there?" "Did Trent ask you to?" "No, he didn't. But I'm worried about you. $25,000 is a lot of money. We understand that, but Trent has thought it through. He says that it's in areas like this that people are looking for cheap appliances. Hazel, I've worked with ordinary people my whole life. Yes, they're looking for cheap stuff, but they also want quality goods. And who's going to believe in the quality of equipment bought in a dilapidated warehouse? You don't even know what the store will look like after the renovation. I know how much the renovation will cost, and I doubt Trent has included those expenses in his business plan." Hazel stood up and began to pace nervously around the kitchen. "Dad, I don't understand what you want from us. We live from paycheck to paycheck. Trent makes $1,200 a month. I make $800. We have to pay for our apartment, food, and clothes for Scarlett. We never have enough money." "I understand." "No, you don't." Her daughter's voice grew louder. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn. Hazel was clearly upset, and my words only irritated her more. "Hazel, please calm down. I don't want to argue with you." "Then support us. Or at least don't interfere." "I'm not interfering with anyone. I'm just expressing my opinion." Scarlett appeared in the room with her unfinished handwriting exercise in her hands. "Mommy, why are you yelling?" "We're not yelling, sweetie. We're just talking." "Grandpa, are you not going to take me for walks anymore?" asked his granddaughter fearfully. "Of course I will, Princess." "Mom and I are just talking about grown-up things." Hazel took her daughter by the hand. "Scarlett, go to your room. Grandpa and I will be done soon." When her granddaughter left, an awkward silence hung in the air. Hazel stood by the window, looking out at the street. I could tell she was upset, but I didn't know how to fix the situation. Hazel, I don't want to upset you. It's just what, Dad? She turned to me with a tired expression. You just don't believe in us? It's not about belief. It's about reality. And the reality is that we're tired of living in poverty. If there's a chance to change that, we're going to take it. Even if that chance could make things worse, it can't get any worse, Dad. It can't. She said it with such bitterness that I felt a twinge in my heart. Were things really that bad for them? Or was it just emotion? Hazel, if you need help, we don't need help, she replied sharply. We need support, and we don't have it. Support and approval are two different things. To me, they're the same thing. I realized the conversation had reached an impasse. Hazel was determined, and my arguments only angered her. Okay, I said, standing up. I'll go. But promise me one thing. If there are any problems, reach out. Don't hesitate. There won't be any problems, she said, but there was no confidence in her voice. I said goodbye to Scarlett and left the house. I felt heavy-hearted. On the one hand, I understood my daughter. It really is hard to live from paycheck to paycheck, especially when you have a child. On the other hand, I could see what they were getting themselves into, and it scared me. At home, I told Myrna about my trip with Otis and my conversation with Hazel. My wife listened attentively, nodding from time to time. Maybe you were too categorical, she asked. Maybe, but I can't keep quiet when I see them making a mistake. Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe they'll really succeed. Myrna, you should see this place. I don't understand who would go there to buy appliances. Well, maybe it will look better after the renovation. Renovation costs money, a lot of money, and I doubt Trent has taken that into account. Myrna poured us some tea and sat down next to us. Declan, maybe we should just let it go. Let them try. After all, they're adults. It's easy to say, let it go. What if they don't succeed? What if they're left with debts? Then we'll help them as best we can. What if our resources aren't enough? Then they'll manage somehow. People do. I finished my tea and looked out the window. It was getting dark outside and the streetlights were coming on. Somewhere out there, in a rented apartment, my daughter was dreaming of a better life and preparing to risk everything for that dream. And I was sitting in my house worrying about how it would all turn out. 4 months flew by quickly. Autumn turned to winter, the first snow fell, and then the thaw came. January in Colorado was surprisingly mild. The temperature rarely dropped below -5, and the snow melted quickly on the roads. During this time, Hazel and I hardly spoke. After that conversation in November, our relationship became strained. My daughter was clearly upset with me for not supporting Trent's plans. When I came to pick up Scarlett, we limited ourselves to formal phrases about the weather and health. Hazel was emphatically polite but cold. Meanwhile, Trent did indeed open his store. In early October, he proudly told anyone who would listen about his new business. He even called Myrna and invited her to come see Techno Service, as he called his enterprise. But my wife and I didn't go. We didn't want to pretend that we approved of this venture. I received bits and pieces of information about how my son-in-law's business was going. Sometimes from neighbors, sometimes from acquaintances who happened to pass by his store. The news wasn't very good. Old Frank Miller, who lives across the street, once said to me, "I saw your son-in-law on Colfax. He's standing outside his store smoking. I don't see any customers." And Mr. Collins, walking his Labrador, said, "I drove by last weekend. The parking lot is empty and the lights are off. Maybe they don't work on weekends?" But I tried not to listen to these conversations and not to jump to conclusions. After all, a new business needs time to get up to speed. Maybe everything will work out for Trent. In mid-January, an event occurred that dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. I was sitting at home reading the newspaper when our neighbor, Mrs. Harrison, rang the doorbell. She was an elderly woman in her 70s who knew all the news in the neighborhood before it even happened. "Declan, can I come in for a minute?" she asked, standing on the doorstep with her cheeks red from the cold. "Of course, Dorothy. Come in." Myrna put the kettle on. Mrs. Harrison sat down on the sofa and took off her mittens and scarf. She was clearly excited and ready to share some important news. "Declan, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I was at my niece's house on Colfax Avenue this morning. You know, she lives near the place where your brother-in-law was opening a store. My heart sank, but I tried to remain calm. And the store is closed. Completely. There's a sign on the door saying, closed for technical reasons. And my niece says no one has been there for 2 weeks. Myrna brought tea and sat down next to us. It was clear from her face that the news did not surprise her. What do the neighbors say? My wife asked. The neighbors say that business was bad for him from the very beginning. There were few customers, mostly local drunks who tried to steal something, and in December they stopped coming altogether. His niece saw him come by several times, stand at the entrance, smoke, and drive away. I see, I said quietly. Declan, I didn't want to upset you, but I thought it was better to know the truth. Thank you, Dorothy. You did the right thing. After the neighbor left, Myrna and I sat in silence. Outside the window, snow was falling slowly, covering the street with a white blanket. What are we going to do now? My wife asked. Nothing. We'll wait until they come to us. What if they don't? They will. $25,000 is not the kind of money you can just forget about. Myrna got up and began clearing away the teacups. I feel sorry for Hazel. So do I, but what could I have done? Forbid them to take out the loan? You could have supported them. Maybe then Trent would have been more motivated to see it through. Myrna, support and money are two different things. No amount of support will make people buy goods from a bad place. Maybe you're right, but it's still a shame 2 more weeks passed before I saw Hazel again. On Saturday morning, I came to pick up Scarlett for our usual walk. In winter, we didn't go to the park, but to the ice rink at the sports center. My granddaughter was learning to skate, and she was doing pretty well. My daughter opened the door, and I knew right away that something was wrong. Hazel looked terrible, pale with dark circles under her eyes, and she had lost weight. Her hair was unwashed and tied back in a messy ponytail. Hi, Dad, she said quietly. Hi, is Scarlett ready? She's in her room, getting ready. Dad, can we talk? Of course. We went into the kitchen. There were some papers on the table, bills, letters from the bank. Hazel sat down and covered her face with her hands. Dad, we have problems, she said without looking up. I know about the store. How? The neighbors saw it. They say it closed. Hazel lifted her head and I saw that her eyes were red from crying. Yes, it closed. 2 months ago. Trent tried to keep it going for another month, but it didn't work out. What exactly happened? There were no customers? None at all. In the first month, we sold $800 worth of appliances. That didn't even cover the rent. Where did you get the merchandise? The same acquaintance Trent mentioned. It turned out that the appliances were in much worse condition than promised. Half of them didn't work at all, and the rest needed serious repairs. Where did you get the money for repairs? There was no money for repairs. Trent tried to fix it himself, but he couldn't. He ruined one refrigerator completely. Hazel stood up and walked to the window. Snowflakes swirled slowly outside. And then the rental problem started. The landlord demanded money for utilities that Trent hadn't factored into his calculations. It turned out that heating and electricity had to be paid for separately. And how much was that? $400 a month in the winter, plus $800 for rent. That's a total of $1,200 in fixed expenses on an income of $800. Where is Trent now? Looking for a job. He's been looking for a month. Best Buy won't take him back. They say there are no vacancies. Scarlett ran into the room wearing her winter coat and carrying her skates. Grandpa, I'm ready. Let's go skating. Just a minute, princess. Give me a couple more minutes to talk to Mom. Scarlett, go to your room for now, Hazel said. Grandpa and I will be done soon. Her granddaughter pouted but obeyed. When she left, Hazel turned to me. Dad, we need help. What kind? The bank is demanding payment on the loan. $670 every month. And we don't have that kind of money. Trent is out of work, and my salary is only enough for food and rent. How much do you owe? We've missed 3 payments. The bank is threatening to take us to court. Hazel sat down at the table and picked up a letter. They can garnish our wages, or force us to sell everything we own. What do you own? A car, furniture, a TV, but none of it is worth much. Maybe $5,000. And the other $20,000? That's why I'm asking for your help. There was a heavy pause. I understood where the conversation was going, and I felt uneasy. Hazel, I can't take on your loan payments. Not the whole loan, just part of it. 10,000 or 15. I don't have that kind of money. Dad, you have a house. You can use it as collateral. I shook my head. Hazel, I'm 67 years old. I can't take out a loan using the house I live in with my mother as collateral. But this is an emergency of your own making. The words came out before I had time to think. Hazel turned even paler. She stood up and began pacing around the kitchen, her hands shaking. Dad, you do realize what will happen if the bank takes you to court? They'll garnish my wages. We won't be able to afford this apartment. We'll have to move to some dump. I understand, and I'm very sorry, but I can't solve your problems with my savings. What savings? The savings are the house. It's the only thing your mother and I have. Hazel stopped and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was a mixture of despair, anger, and disappointment. I see, she said slowly. So strangers at the bank are more important to you than your own daughter and granddaughter. It's not about importance. It's about responsibility. You took out a loan without asking my opinion. Now you want me to pay for it. At that moment, her granddaughter ran into the kitchen again. Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you yelling? Scarlett, go to your room, Hazel said sharply. But Mommy? Go to your room, I said. The girl looked at us in fear and ran to her room. Hazel covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Hazel, please calm down, I said more gently. Let's think about what we can do. Maybe there are other options. What options? She sobbed. We've thought of everything. Trent's parents live in another state and are barely making ends meet themselves. There's no one else to help. Have you talked to the bank? Maybe they'll agree to restructure the debt? We have. They're willing to lower the monthly payment to $400, but then the loan will be spread out over 15 years. That's better than bankruptcy. $400 every month for 15 years? We'll be destitute until Scarlett grows up. But you'll be able to rent an apartment and buy food. What about clothes? What about our daughter's education? What about medical care if someone gets sick? Hazel wiped her tears and looked at me. Dad, this is my last request. Help us. If not with money, then at least with a guarantee. The bank will agree to better terms if we have a guarantor. Hazel, a guarantee means that if you can't pay, I will. We will pay. Trent will find a job and we will pay. What if he doesn't? Or what if he finds one but wants to go back into business? He won't. He's learned his lesson. Hazel, I can't risk the house. I'm sorry, but I can't. Her daughter's face changed. The tears dried up and were replaced by an expression of cold anger. I understand, she said quietly. So we're strangers to you. Hazel went to the door and called to her daughter. Scarlett, come here. Her granddaughter appeared in the doorway with tear-stained eyes. Mommy, are we going skating? No, we're not. Grandpa's leaving. Why? Hazel took her daughter by the hand and looked me in the eyes. Because Grandpa is no longer a member of our family. He doesn't want to help us. Hazel, don't do that, I asked. Scarlett, Grandpa thinks we are to blame for our problems, and he's not going to help us. Grandpa, is that true? Asked his granddaughter in a trembling voice. No, Princess, that's not true. I love you and your mother. If you love us, then help us, said Hazel. And if you won't help us, then don't come anymore. And don't call Mom. What will happen to our walks? Scarlett cried. There will be no more walks. Grandpa has decided that his house is more important than us. I realized that there was no point in staying any longer. Hazel was hysterical and wouldn't listen to any arguments. All right, I said. If that's what you've decided, then so be it. I kissed Scarlett on the top of her head and headed for the door. Hazel followed me. And don't even think about coming back until you're ready to really help. I put on my jacket and opened the door. I turned around at the threshold. Hazel, when you calm down, think about what you did today. And what your daughter saw, she saw what kind of grandfather she has, my daughter replied and slammed the door. I stood on the porch for a few minutes, not knowing what to do. Through the window, I could hear Scarlett crying. I wanted to go back, hug my granddaughter, and tell her that everything would be okay. But the door was locked and Hazel was unlikely to open it. At home, I told Myrna what had happened. My wife listened silently. shaking her head from time to time. Maybe you should have agreed, she asked at the end. To what? To mortgage the house to cover someone else's debts? Not someone else's. Our daughter's Myrna. We have a small pension in this house. If we lose it, we'll be destitute. And then who will help Scarlett if she needs it? Maybe you're right, but I still feel sorry for the girl. I feel sorry for her too. But I can't solve grown-ups' problems at the expense of our future. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. I kept seeing Scarlett's crying face and hearing Hazel's words that I was no longer a member of the family. Maybe I had been cruel. Maybe I should have taken the risk. But then I remembered the room on Colfax Avenue, Trent's naivety, and the fact that I had warned about this 4 months ago. No, I decided I did the right thing, cruel but right. A week passed after that Saturday scandal. A difficult, painful week, during which I thought every day about Scarlett and how she cried when her mother forbade her to see me. Myrna was also worried, but unlike me, she didn't consider the situation hopeless. Declan, we have to do something, she said at breakfast on Wednesday. We can't just sit around and wait. What can we do? Hazel made it clear she doesn't want to see me. She was upset. People say a lot of unnecessary things when they're in that state. I don't think it was unnecessary. She really does blame me for their problems. Myrna put down her coffee cup and looked at me. Maybe she's right. Maybe we really should help. Myrna, we've already discussed this. I can't risk the house. Then let's at least try to talk to her. Maybe we can find some kind of compromise. She won't talk to me. She'll talk to me. I didn't refuse to help. After much persuasion, I agreed to let Myrna call Hazel. My wife waited until evening, when our daughter came home from work, and then dialed the familiar number. I sat nearby and could only hear one side of the conversation, but that was enough to understand how things were going. Hazel, hi, it's Mom. Yes, I know what happened. No, he didn't ask me to call. Honey, let's talk calmly. Myrna fell silent, apparently listening to her daughter's long tirade. I could see from her face that the conversation wasn't going well. Hazel, he's not your enemy. Of course, we're worried, but you have to understand, we don't have that kind of money either. Another pause. Myrna shook her head and gestured to me that things were not going well. And how is Scarlett? Is she asking about her grandfather? I see. Hazel, maybe we could meet and talk without emotions? My wife took the phone away from her ear and looked at it. Apparently, her daughter had hung up. What did she say? I asked. She said that until you change your mind, there's nothing to talk about, and that Scarlett now understands what kind of grandparents she has. Is that all? That's all. She hung up. My heart sank. Hazel was clearly turning our daughter against us, and that hurt the most. The next day, Myrna tried again. She called in the morning before Hazel had left for work. Hazel, please don't hang up. I want to talk about Scarlett. Yes, I understand you're angry, but the girl isn't to blame for anything. This conversation was even shorter than the previous one. Hazel said that Scarlett was doing just fine without us and hung up again. Maybe we should go see them, suggested Myrna. And then what? Stand outside the door until she opens it? That won't help. How about a letter? Myrna, the problem isn't how we communicate. The problem is that Hazel wants one thing, for me to pay their debts. And I can't do that. Kyle came to see us on Friday evening. He showed up unannounced, parked his motorcycle by the porch, and knocked on the door. He looked gloomy and clearly worried about something. Hi, he said, taking off his leather jacket. Can we talk? Of course, son. Sit down. Mom will make some tea. Kyle sat down at the table and rubbed his face with his hands. It was clear that he had had a difficult day. I went to see Hazel yesterday, he said without preamble. How is she? Bad, really bad. She looks like a ghost. She's lost about 10 pounds. And Trent is completely lost. Did he find a job? Yes. He's a stocker at the supermarket, $1,000 a month, but it's temporary until he finds something better. Myrna brought tea and cookies and sat down next to us. How's Scarlett? She asked. Scarlett asks about you, especially about Grandpa. Hazel tells her that you don't want to talk to them anymore. That's not true. I know it's not true. I tried to explain it to her, but she won't listen. Kyle took a cookie but didn't eat it, just crumbled it in his hands. Dad, I understand your position. It really is crazy to risk your house at your age. But Hazel doesn't understand that. To her, you just abandoned them in their time of need. What was I supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe find some kind of middle ground. What middle ground? She asked for $20,000 or a guarantee. I can't give her either. How about helping her out a little? 5,000? 10? Kyle, 5 or 10,000 won't solve the problem. They need to pay off the entire debt. Otherwise, the bank will still take them to court. Her son finished his tea and leaned back in his chair. You know what bothers me the most? That this could have been avoided if Trent hadn't been such a stubborn idiot. Kyle, don't, said Myrna. What's done is done. No, Mom, I have to. I tried to talk him out of it too. I visited them in September, after he had already signed the lease. I told him it was risky, that it would be better to work for another year or two to gain experience. And what did he say? The same thing he said to you, that he had everything figured out, that he knew the market. He even got offended when I suggested we go see the place together. Did you go? I did. Once in October. Dad, you saw that place. Even I was afraid to go there on my motorcycle. The neighborhood is no picnic. Kyle stood up and walked over to the window. The most upsetting thing is that Hazel knew it was a bad deal. I could see it in her eyes, but she supported her husband because he promised her a better life. And now? Now they have a debt of $25,000 and no prospects of paying it off. The bank has already sent a warning about possible legal action. I know, Hazel told me. And you know what else? Trent blames you for everything. Me? You. He says that if you had supported them from the beginning, things would have worked out. That you jinxed them, that's nonsense. Of course it is. But Hazel believes it, or pretends to believe it. Kyle came back to the table and looked at me. Dad, I'm not asking you to change your mind, but maybe it's worth trying to make peace with them. Find some way to communicate despite everything. How? Hazel doesn't want to talk through Scarlett. The girl misses her grandfather. Maybe if you come to her school. Kyle, that will only complicate things. Hazel will think I'm turning her granddaughter against her. What about through me? I'll take Scarlett for the weekend and bring her to you. Hazel won't allow it. She will. I already talked to her. She agreed that her granddaughter needs to communicate with her uncle. Myrna perked up. Really? She agreed. She agreed. But on one condition, no talk of money or loans, and no attempts to change her mind. Okay, I said. Let's do it that way. Kyle left late in the evening, promising to bring Scarlett the following weekend. I felt a little better. At least I would be able to see my granddaughter. On Tuesday, as usual, I met Otis at Sally's Cafe. My friend noticed my bad mood even before we started playing dominoes. What's wrong? He asked, laying out the tiles. You look like you're at a funeral. I told him about the argument with Hazel, the demand for money, and how my daughter had forbidden my granddaughter from communicating with me. Otis listened attentively, shaking his head from time to time. That's a tough situation, he said at the end. But you did the right thing. Sometimes I think I was wrong. Maybe I should have taken the risk. Declan, do you remember my neighbor Charlie Brown? The one who sold his house and moved into an apartment? That's the one. Do you know why he sold his house? No, because his son asked him for money for a business. Charlie mortgaged his house and gave his son $30,000. His son went bankrupt. Charlie couldn't pay off the loan. The bank took the house. How is he now? He lives in a one-room apartment, pays $600 in rent from his $800 pension. And his son? His son found a new job, bought a car, lives a normal life. He doesn't even remember his father's house. I see. That's why you did the right thing. Helping your children is one thing. Risking your own home is quite another. We played dominoes for an hour, then Otis suggested we go for a walk. The weather was not bad for February. 3 degrees above zero, sunny, the snow had melted. By the way, he said as we walked down Tennyson Street, I was at the store near the mall yesterday. There are ads on the bulletin board there. I saw one. Someone is selling a TV and a refrigerator. Cheap, so what? Well, I thought, maybe your daughter is selling off her belongings. Getting ready to move. What do you mean? Well, if the bank is taking legal action, they usually give people advance warning. Maybe they have already received official notification. My heart sank. I hadn't thought about it. But Otis was right. If the bank was really preparing for legal action, Hazel could have received official documents. Otis, when did you see this ad? Last night, but it's not necessarily them. There are a lot of ads and a lot of people. It's still unpleasant. Declan, why don't you try talking to your daughter? Not about money, just to see how she's doing. She won't talk to me. You try. Tell her you're worried, that you want to help, but not with money. That evening, I decided to call Hazel after all. I dialed the number while Myrna was washing the dishes so my wife wouldn't hear the conversation. The phone rang for a long time, then my daughter answered in a tired voice. Hello? Hazel, it's Dad. Pause. I thought she was going to hang up. What do you want? She asked coldly. I wanted to see how you were doing. How Scarlett was doing. Things are bad. Scarlett is fine. Hazel, I heard that you might be selling things. How did you hear that? It doesn't matter. Is it true? It's true. We're selling everything we can. We're preparing for court. When is the court date? In a month. Unless we pay the entire amount before then. How much is it now with interest? $27,800. The amount was even more than I thought. Hazel, where will you live if what? If the bank takes us to court? I don't know. We'll find something cheap. Or we'll go to Trent's parents in Texas. Texas? What choice do we have? We can't afford anything here. Hazel, it's not that I don't want to help. Don't, Dad. We understand. Goodbye. She hung up, and I was left sitting there with the dead phone in my hands. The situation was even worse than I had thought. A month until the trial, plus a possible move to another state. That meant I could lose not only my daughter, but also my granddaughter. Who were you talking to? Myrna asked, drying her hands with a towel. Hazel. Things are really bad for them. I told my wife about the conversation and that they might be moving to Texas. Myrna listened with growing concern. Declan, maybe there's something we can do. Not pay off the entire debt, but at least help with the move. Myrna, if they move to Texas, the move is the least of their problems. But we won't see Scarlett anymore. We won't. And that's the worst part. My wife sat down next to me and took my hand. Declan, I understand that you're afraid of losing the house. But maybe it's worth the risk? At least partially? Myrna, if we give them $10,000, it won't solve the problem. And if we give them $27,000, we risk losing our own home. What if we take out a loan for less than the full amount? $15,000? And then what? Where will the remaining $13,000 come from? I don't know, but at least we'll try. I was silent for a long time, thinking about my wife's proposal. On the one hand, $15,000 still wouldn't save Hazel from bankruptcy. On the other hand, it would give them time to find a way out. Okay, I said finally, let's try. But on one condition, the money is not for Hazel or Trent. It goes straight to the bank to pay off the debt, agreed? And no guarantees for the remaining amount. Agreed. Then tomorrow I'll go to the bank and find out the terms for loans secured by real estate. Myrna hugged me. Thank you, Declan. I know this is hard for you. I just hope we don't regret it. That night I lay awake for a long time, wondering if we had made the right decision. $15,000 is a lot of money for our budget. But on the other hand, this is my daughter and granddaughter. Maybe it was really worth the risk, or maybe it would only delay the inevitable. And in 6 months, we would find ourselves in the same situation, only with 2 loans instead of 1. In the morning, I decided to talk to Kyle first. I called him at work and asked him to come by in the evening. Is something wrong? My son asked anxiously. No, I just want to ask your advice. It's about Hazel. I'll come by after work. By evening, I had changed my mind several times. Sometimes it seemed like we needed to help. Other times, like it was a waste of money. Myrna was also nervous, but she tried to support the decision. When Kyle arrived, I told him about my conversation with Hazel and our decision to take out a loan for $15,000. My son listened attentively, then was silent for a long time. Dad, he finally said, I understand that you want to help, but I'm afraid it won't help. Why? Because the problem isn't money. The problem is Trent. He hasn't changed. He still thinks that circumstances are to blame for everything, not his decisions. What do you suggest? Nothing. I'm just not sure it's worth risking your money on someone who, doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions. But it's not just about Trent. It's about Hazel and Scarlett. I know. That's why I'm struggling. On the one hand, I want to help my sister. On the other hand, I realize that the money could just disappear. We talked late into the night, but never came to a definitive conclusion. In the end, Kyle said, "Decide for yourselves. I'll support whatever you decide." "Are you still bringing Scarlett for the weekend?" "Of course, that's what we agreed." After our son left, Myrna and I discussed everything again. We decided to postpone going to the bank for a week. Let's see how the meeting with Scarlett goes. Talk to her, find out how things are at home. Then we'll make a final decision. Exactly 1 week had passed since the scandal at Hazel's house when she forbade Scarlett from communicating with me. 7 days that dragged on like 7 months. Myrna and I lived in tension, waiting every day for news about what was happening with our daughter and granddaughter, but the silence was complete. During that week, I couldn't bring myself to go to the bank for a loan secured by the house. Every morning I would get ready to go, and then I would put it off. Myrna didn't insist, seeing how I was struggling with this decision. Kyle didn't call either. He probably understood that it wasn't worth rushing things. We lived in a strange state of limbo, as if time had stopped. I went about my usual business, reading the newspaper, meeting with Otis, helping Myrna with the housework, but my thoughts kept returning to my daughter and granddaughter. What was happening to them? How were they coping? Had Trent found a permanent job? Had the bank filed a lawsuit? On Monday evening, March the 7th, Myrna and I went to bed early. It was a cloudy and rainy day and the mood was gloomy. My wife tossed and turned for a long time, then fell silent. I lay there listening to the wind howling outside the window and the rain pounding on the glass. Around 2 in the morning, I was awakened by a knock on the door. At first, I thought it was the wind slamming the gate, but the knocking continued, insistent, uneven. I got up, threw on my robe, and quietly went downstairs so as not to wake Myrna. "Who's there?" I asked, approaching the door. "Dad, it's me," came Hazel's trembling voice. I quickly unlocked the door and opened it. My daughter and granddaughter were standing on the doorstep, soaked to the skin. Hazel was holding a worn suitcase in one hand and hugging Scarlett, who was quietly sobbing with the other. Both of their faces were pale, their eyes red from crying. "Hazel! Scarlett! My God, what happened? Come in quickly." My daughter entered the hallway but did not rush to take off her clothes. She stood there, shivering from the cold, and looked at me as if she couldn't believe I had let her in. "Dad," she said in a trembling voice, Can we stay? Just for one night?" "Of course you can." "What kind of question is that?" "Take off your wet clothes, I'll make some tea." At that moment, Myrna appeared on the stairs in her bathrobe. "Declan, what's going on?" Seeing her daughter and granddaughter, she gasped, "Hazel! Scarlett! My God, what happened to you?" "Mom!" Hazel whispered and rushed into her mother's arms. Myrna hugged her daughter, and I picked up the trembling Scarlett. "Princess, what happened?" "Why are you crying?" "Grandpa," her granddaughter sobbed, "we don't have a home anymore. And Daddy isn't Daddy anymore." My heart sank. I carried Scarlett to the living room and sat her down on the sofa, covering her with a blanket. Meanwhile, Myrna helped Hazel take off her wet jacket. "Let's go to the kitchen," I said. "It's warmer there." "Tell me what happened." We went to the kitchen. I put the kettle on and got some cookies. Hazel sat down at the table, her head in her hands. Scarlett snuggled up to her grandmother, who quietly stroked her hair. "Hazel, tell us," Myrna said gently. My daughter looked up. Her face was gaunt and aged. It was clear that this week had been very hard on her. "This morning," she began in a trembling voice, "this morning the bank came. They said the house was theirs. They gave us 4 hours to pack our things." Hazel cried, "Dad, we have nothing left." We packed only the bare essentials in one suitcase. We had to leave everything else behind. Scarlett looked up with tear-filled eyes. "Grandpa, my toys are still in that house. Will they take them now?" "I don't know, Princess, but we'll buy you new toys." "Where's Dad?" asked his granddaughter. "Why didn't he come with us?" Hazel and Myrna exchanged glances. It was clear that this was the most painful question. Scarlett, Hazel said quietly, Daddy, Daddy won't be living with us anymore. Why? Because he decided he didn't want to be a daddy anymore. I poured everyone some tea, trying to understand what exactly had happened to Trent. Hazel, I asked cautiously, where is Trent now? I don't know, my daughter replied, wiping away her tears. When we came home from the bank this morning, he wasn't there. Then I found a note. What note? He wrote that he couldn't take it anymore, that he was tired of problems and debts, and that he was filing for divorce. Did he leave home? Yes. He took his things and left. In the note, he wrote that he was going to his mother in Texas to start a new life. What about you? What about Scarlett? He wrote that we were young and could manage on our own, and that it would be better if he disappeared so he wouldn't get in the way of us rebuilding our lives. I felt anger boiling up inside me. Leaving his wife and child at a time like this was despicable, even for Trent. Scoundrel, I muttered. Dad, don't, said Hazel. Scarlett can hear you. I'm sorry, but how can you abandon your family when they need you most? He got scared. He couldn't handle the pressure and ran away. Scarlett finished her milk and rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Grandma, are we going to live with you now? Of course, dear. As long as you want. Will I go to the same school? Yes, Grandpa will drive you. Hazel looked at me. Dad, I'm sorry we came so late. I didn't know where else to go. Hazel, this is your home. You can come here anytime, even after what I said to you. Even after that. You're my daughter and nothing will change that. I was wrong. You warned us, and I didn't listen. I thought you just didn't believe in us. I didn't believe in Trent. I always believed in you. What will happen now? With the debts? With the court? We'll figure it out tomorrow. We'll go to a lawyer and see what can be done. We don't have money for a lawyer. We have a house. If worst comes to worst, we'll mortgage it and hire a good lawyer. Hazel looked at me in surprise. But you said you couldn't risk the house. I did. Now I understand that a house is for a family to live in. And you are my family. My daughter cried again, but now they were tears of relief. Thank you, Dad. I don't know what we would have done without you. Don't thank me. I should have helped sooner. Myrna got up and took Scarlett by the hand. Come on, dear. I'll put you to bed. You're tired. Will I see my room in the morning? Of course you will. We have a room just for you. Myrna took her granddaughter upstairs, and Hazel and I stayed in the kitchen. My daughter sat with her head down, slowly sipping her tea. Hazel, I said, don't blame yourself for what happened. You did what a wife does. You supported your husband. I supported an idiot who abandoned us at the first sign of trouble. You didn't know that then. I did. Deep down, I knew something was wrong with him, but I didn't want to believe it. What are your plans now? I don't know. Find a second job so I can pay off my debts faster. Rent a small apartment when I have the money. Why rent? Live here. Dad, we can't live with you permanently. You have your own life. Our life got better when you came back. A house without children and grandchildren is not a home, just a building. What about Mom? Won't it be hard for her? Mom will be happy. She missed Scarlett so much. Hazel finished her tea and stood up. Dad, I'm very tired. Can I go to bed? Of course. Mom made up a bed for you in the guest room. Thank you. My daughter came up to me and hugged me. I'm sorry for everything. For not listening to you. For what I said to you last time. Forget about it. The main thing is that you're home. Hazel went upstairs and I stayed in the kitchen. I turned off the light but didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark and thought about how life sometimes takes strange turns. Just a week ago, my daughter and I weren't talking, and now she's back home. Of course, the problems haven't gone away. The $27,000 debt is still there. Trent filed for divorce and disappeared. A court case and years of payments lay ahead. But the main thing was that the family was together again. I got up, put the cups in the sink, and slowly went upstairs. The nightlight was on in the guest room. Myrna was putting Scarlett to bed. I could hear quiet voices. Grandma was telling her granddaughter something. Myrna was already waiting for me in our bedroom. How's Hazel? She whispered. Tired. But she seems to have calmed down a bit. How are you? I'm glad they're home. Very glad. Are we going to the lawyer tomorrow? We are. We'll see what we can do about these debts. What if we have to mortgage the house? We'll mortgage it. We don't need a house if we don't have a family in it. Myrna hugged me. You made the right decision, Declan. Family is the most important thing. It's just a shame I realized it so late. Better late than never. We went to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. I listened to the rain subsiding outside the window and thought about tomorrow. There was a lot to decide, issues with debts, divorce, and work for Hazel. But the most important thing had already happened. The family was reunited. Sometime around 4 in the morning, the rain stopped completely. The house became quiet and peaceful. My daughter and granddaughter were sleeping in the guest room. They were home. They were safe. We would figure out the rest somehow. I closed my eyes and finally fell asleep, realizing that our family had to start over. But we would start together, and that was the most important thing.